Hello, everybody. You are tuned in to the Walk Off podcast here. As usual, I'm Justin, your host. Today, I'm joined with Leroy and our buddy Jared here. How are you doing today, Jared? I'll start with you.
I'm doing great, man. I feel like I'm on every week now, and that kind of scares me. I feel pretty bad for our listeners because they have to listen to me yap more than the seventh inning stretch. But I'm here and I'm ready to go. Leroy, how about you?
I'm doing great. We I'll tell you, we've got a good crew, so it doesn't matter which three of us are in here each week. I think our listeners are lucky regardless.
Yeah, here we are about 20 games into the regular season. Baseball is getting real exciting. We're getting into that mode where we're realizing this isn't a 60 game season anymore. We're back at what we're used to. And for me, I think that's very fun. So we're not going to waste any time here today. We're going to jump right into our first topic. Because I think this is a fun one. This is going to be the biggest story come this offseason is which free agent shortstop do you sign at the end of this year? So right now we have a couple shortstops here, big names. We have Carlos Correa, Trevor Story, Corey Seager, and Javi Baez. Now, if you're a GM of a baseball team, that has the money to sign any of these four players, that's to me, this is a very, very tough decision, especially when you're looking at the shortstop position. And of course, all these players that are going to be available. So like I said, it's going to be a big story here. But Jared, I want to go to you first. If you're a GM of any baseball team here, what shortstop are you taking?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic. Because this might be one of the best shortstop draft classes, or excuse me, free agency classes we've seen in quite some time. And if it weren't for Francisco Lindor signing an extension with the Mets, he would have been a free agent in this class too. These are just the top four guys that we think of, right, when we come to premium players at that position. And we all know shortstop is one of the most, uh, you know, it's one of the best positions in baseball, one of the leaders on the field, and one of the positions where there's very many superstars. You could consider these four players as in the top five shortstops right now in baseball, plus Lindor. But the one guy I want to talk about a little bit and who I would pick if I was a GM of any team, I want to pick Corey Seager, and not just because of the last year or two. We saw what he did in the World Series. He was the MVP of the NLCS and the World Series. He's a two-time Silver Slugger, two-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year, career batting average of 294. That's amazing. And he's been playing for about 7 years now, all with the Dodgers, came up when he was 21 years old. He hasn't hit below 267 in his career so far, which is very nice. And the Dodgers, they got lots of superstars, this guy included. I have a feeling that they're going to have the money to re-sign this guy, and why wouldn't you, right? He's a top five shortstop in the game. You saw what he could do in the biggest moments in baseball, in the playoffs. He has 91 career home runs with 629 hits so far, a WAR of 18, and an on base percentage of 362 career. He's going to get you a lot of RBIs, good fielder, left handed bat, can pretty much play him anywhere from the 1 through 6 hole. The Dodgers just got a real nice, solid all around shortstop here. He's somebody you want leading your team. He's only 27 years old, by the way. So if I was going to pick a shortstop from this group of guys, it would be Corey Seager. How about you, Leroy?
Yeah, the shortstop position is just this may be the best we've ever seen. Top to bottom shortstops. I mean, like you mentioned, these four guys are absolute studs, and we're still leaving out Lindor, Tatis, Bogarts. I mean, there's so many, and these four guys coming up as free agents, it's just mind blowing. It kind of takes me back to the '90s when we had Garcia Parra, Derek Jeter, and A-Rod all playing shortstop, and some of the older guys. I think Cal was still hanging around then, but yeah, so this was a really interesting question and a very tough decision if you're a GM that's in the market for a shortstop and have the money to spend. All these guys are 26, 27, 28 years old. The issue with so looking at all four, I feel like you can find warts or issues with three of the four, right? Carlos Correa, He really showed some weaknesses last year. Health has been an issue his whole career. He's only played in more than 110 games once in his whole career, and that was his second year. 2020 was pretty bad for him. I don't know if the upside is there for Correa as it was at one time. Javi Baez he's a stud too. I mean, his 162 game average is 27 home runs, 15 stolen bases, although that 15 is skewed a little bit by one outlier a year. But his plate discipline is a real issue for him, and it seems to be getting worse. Trevor Story is interesting. And, we talked a little bit on last week's episode about the Coors Field effect. And if you look at Trevor Story's 162 game average over the course of his career, 35 home runs, 21 stolen bases, and a 342 on base percentage, you're like, wow, like that's it. That's, if you just consider that, he's your guy. If you're signing a free agent, but then you start to look at his away numbers, his numbers away from Coors Field, and you break that down into a 162 game average, and it's 26 home runs and a 316 on base percentage. And don't get me wrong, those are not numbers to sneeze at. Those are great numbers, but what are you paying for if you're signing him as a free agent? You're probably paying for 35 home runs and a 342 on base percentage when he's giving you 26 and a 316. So then we look at Seager. And so, Jared, I'm gonna agree with you. So Seager is fully recovered, it appears, from his injury that really seemed to sap a lot from him. And so let's take a look at pre-injury or injury era and last year when he seemed to be fully recovered. So his barrel rate, the rate at which he makes good barrel contact with the ball, he was 7.3 for his career, and then last year it jumped up to 15.8. The exit velocity of his hits, he was 88.8 for his career. Last year, that jumped up to 93.2. He seems to be, so he was a top prospect who had an injury that seemed to sap some things from it. And he seems to be coming out of that. This guy's an all-star for years to come for whoever signs him. So if it's me, I'm going Seager 1, Story 2, and then coin flipping between Baez and Correa, depending on who's cheapest.
Yeah, like you guys said, this is a really tough decision between the four. Really, when I look at this as like an Orioles fan, I would give up really anything to have any one of those four, But then when you're looking at these teams are going to be able to afford players like this, it definitely is tough. I'm going to start with Correa. He's one that just does worry me a little bit. He had that whole scandal. His strikeout rate is just rocketed up the last couple of years. He can be very clutch in postseason situations. But let's not forget that that's that your team's got to put you in those situations. We're not going to look at signing a player off of, his multiple clutch home runs over the last couple of postseasons. It's the same thing between him and Baez that worries me is the consistency. When you're going out and you're spending this type of money on these kind of contracts that we see nowadays with these kind of players, you're looking for consistency is the main piece. And from those two, that's something you're not getting. And then getting here with Story, that Coors Field effect does worry me a little bit. Like you said, Leroy, when you look at his road numbers, they're completely different than his home numbers. It's almost like it's two different stories, literally and figuratively. That, again, something in the sense of spending this kind of money on a player like that definitely is worrisome when you look at a 8 to 9 to 10-year deal upwards to $280-300 million. We've seen as Oriole fans how a contract like that can cripple your team when the production is not $280 to $300 million worth of production. And then based off that, the thing it's for me, I do think it is a little easy to say I would go with Corey Seager. Again, when you look across his career, the consistency is just unmatched. No matter his splits between right and left-handed hit pitchers is really great. He brings a good left-handed bat to your lineup. Something with him, he's just a double machine too. He's someone that puts himself in scoring position. He scores those runs for your teams with a great career batting average, like you said, Jared, just under 300 for the amount of time he has now been in the league. That's pretty incredible to me. But I'll look at a couple things here with him. that just, really stuck out to me. He's a guy that doesn't strike out too much. He's going to strike out. It's 2021. Every batter strikes out. But he is someone that does limit the strikeouts, which, in this day is big. Then this here just blows my mind. So as we know, in 2018, he suffered that injury. We know it ruined the hearts of Baltimore fans as Manny Machado was sent to, replace him for the end of that season. So we'll kind of ignore that 2018 short season there. But every other season he's played, 2015 through 2021, minus 18, he has an OPS plus of at least 100 in every single year. So again, what that means is he is hitting for power and getting the total bases that is right at average for the league. And a lot of these years are a lot higher. His first year came out 2015, 174 OPS plus. It's 2 All-Star years, 2016 and 17, 134 and 126 OPS plus, respectively. That's just insane. Again, other than 18, he has never finished a season under an 817 OPS. That's just nuts. And that's consistency. Like I'm saying, when you're looking across the board throughout his career, when you're paying this guy for 10 years and you can look back at these 7 and he is putting up that production, sitting here at only 26 years old, turns 27, I think, in like 3 days from now. That's what you're looking for, with the player. Not to mention, we see the kind of leader he is. He's a quiet leader as well on the field. It's really a big part of the Dodgers finally, getting to that ring as we saw him win the championship series and World Series MVP. It's definitely the guy I'm putting my money on for sure.
Yeah, and Justin, I like how you said that he's a quiet leader because we know the Dodgers, they got they got Mookie Betts, they got Cody Bellinger, Justin Turner's been there forever, Max Muncy. But then you also got Corey Seager, who could possibly be the best shortstop in the game for over the last few seasons. Really quickly, before we go on, and I don't know if Leroy, you want to chime in on this too, but when I look at these 4 shortstops specifically, I see 2 that are most likely going to sign extensions with their current teams and 2 that are going to leave somewhere else. The 2 that are going to stay are probably Corey Seager and Javier Baez. I just can't see a situation where Corey will leave the Dodgers and the Dodgers will let him go. And I don't see a situation, same thing with the Cubs. I think Javier Baez likes being a Cub. He likes being in Chicago. But Trevor Story's already made it known that he's not going to re-sign with Colorado at the end of the year. So they're most likely going to trade him at the deadline to a contender who can probably re-sign him. So what does that mean? Here you go, Yankees fans. Take Trevor Story. Carlos Correa is kind of a coin flip. He turned down an offer for I believe 180 million for 6 years. Obviously, I think anybody would turn that down when you're a player caliber like that. But a sneaky team that would most likely not sign one of those 2 that I would like to see sign one of those 2 is the Oakland Athletics. And we're going to talk about them in a little bit. Obviously, they don't have the cap to do that, I wouldn't think. But to have a Trevor Story in that lineup with somebody like Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, and all the rest, that could put the A's over the top in the AL West, in my opinion. But I don't think they're going to be able to spend that much money. The Angels, maybe, if they don't want to stick with somebody like Jose Iglesias, he's a free agent, I believe, as well. So maybe they could do it. It's hard to tell nowadays in 2021 who's going to sign who with all the money and whatnot. But Leroy, do you agree with that before we move on?
Yeah, what a surprise. The big market teams are going to sign their players and the small market teams are going to let their guys go. And I think Houston, they're caught in this kind of like they're on the tail end of their run and they're probably looking at a rebuild. So it's hard to say which direction they'll go. So I think, what you said is spot on for Trevor Story, Jared. It comes down to 2 things. One, capital and minor league capital and what you've got and are able to do. So and then 2, signability. So you might be looking at a team, I don't know, what's Philadelphia's shortstop situation look like? Like a team that feels like they can contend now. They're reaching the end of their run. Maybe we sign a guy like Trevor Story, but don't look to re-sign him, or a loaded team like the Yankees that say, who cares about prospects here? Take them all, and we can sign this guy long term. Yeah.
I just wonder if the Yankees would be willing to give up somebody like a Gleyber Torres for Trevor Story. Somebody who's still fairly young, have a little bit of more service time than Trevor Story. Somebody who could probably hit 30+ homers in Coors Field in Colorado. Just something that's to throw up in the air there.
Or one of these surprise young teams that are in contention, when the trade deadline rolls around.
Seattle.
They've
Yeah.
got some draft capital and just say, let's go for it this year. We know we're going to lose them next year. Yeah.
Yeah,
It'd be
that's
interesting.
definitely an interesting situation to see what's going to go on with Story. I personally, I predicted this to both of you. I'm expecting him to be in pinstripes and playing in Camden Yards as a Yankee by August. When you look at Gleyber Torres, has been, as I'll talk about this soon, a giant thorn in the side of the Yankees. For them personally, that's a move they can afford to make in terms of the trade as well with what they have in their system. But before we get too deep into that, we're going to jump to our next segment. A new thing we have here, we're going to talk about our teams that are hot or not. So we're each going to pick one hot team, one not team, and break that down for you. So Jared, why don't you kick that off for us with your picks?
I am so excited for this segment, guys. I brought out all the stats, and if our listeners couldn't tell, we're stats men. That's just what we are. We like the numbers. Looking to see who's hot, who's not in baseball. My hot team, I might have jinxed them because they're currently losing 10-0 against the Chicago Cubs in the fourth inning of a ball game. But my hot team is the Milwaukee Brewers, and I'm going to tell you why. Their starting rotation ERA is 1.99. That's incredible in today's MLB. It's leading the way, of course, with Corbin Burnes, who we're going to talk about later on the show, but he's 2-0 with a 0.37 ERA and a historically great start for the walks and strikeout department. 40 strikeouts with no walks yet. The best ratio to start a season outside of Kenley Jansen, who had 51 strikeouts without a walk. We'll talk about that again later in the show, but of course, Brandon Woodruff and Freddie Peralta have been amazing, each having sub 2.25 ERAs, sub 1 WHIPs. Opposing hitters against those three pitchers I mentioned are batting in the low 100s. And Brett Anderson has been, an above average guy. Adrian Hauser is pretty good for a number 5 guy. He's been pretty serviceable. But guys, their pitching as a whole has struck out the 5th most batters in baseball. And they have had the 3rd best ERA in baseball at 2.71. So the reason they're hot right now is because of their pitching staff. And they've given up the 2nd fewest amount of earned runs so far this year at just 49, and have the lowest opponent batting average in the league at 189 batting average. So the reason they're winning is because they're pitching, both their rotation and their bullpen. They're 7-3 in their last 10 games and have won their last 3 by sweeping the Padres. That's a pretty big accomplishment, if you ask me. And speaking of the Padres, they're actually going to be my not for this segment. They're 3-7 in their last 10 games. They have team batting average that's 15th best in baseball at just 231, and their OPS is 20th at 0.667. They've scored the 17th most runs, which is 75, and have struck out the 10th most times in baseball at 173. It's a lot of strikeouts. In the last 7 games, they have hit a measly 189 with the 2nd lowest OPS in the majors at 0.5224. And get this, guys, they have struck out 79 times in just that span in the last 7 days, which is the most in baseball. So to say their offense has been scuffling is definitely an understatement. Their pitching has been pretty decent. They've kept them in games, not giving up too many runs. It's just the offense is so cold that they just can't get any run support. So maybe I helped them out because they beat the Dodgers last night and again a close game. So hopefully they're on the right track. But that's my hot and not. Leroy, who do you have?
Yeah, so for the hot team, I'm going to stay in your not division and go with the Dodgers. It's almost a no-brainer, right? I mean, the Dodgers are looking like not just one of the best teams this year, but one of the best teams ever. Right now, they're on pace to win 125 games and lose 37, which would obliterate the record for most wins in a season. Now, that's their pace. They've opened up a 4-game lead on their toughest competition, theoretically, the Padres, which was a 5-game lead before last night's game. They've got a run differential of plus 2.1 per game. So they're outscoring their opponents by 2.1 runs per game. And just to put that into context for you, Toronto Blue Jays are 6th in the major league in run differential. They're at plus 0.6. The Dodgers are a full run and a half ahead of Toronto, and only 5 places ahead. I mean, it's just insane what they're doing right now. And to top it all off, they've missed for part of the season. They've missed Cody Bellinger, Gavin Lux, Mookie Betts has been in and out of the lineup, injured. They're just on an insane roll right now that looks like, from the untrained eye, it could end up being one of the best seasons, if not the best season ever.
Yeah.
However, there are some warts there with the Dodgers that you need to take a look at. First of all, they've played 8 of their 19 games against teams with a record of 500 or better. They're only 5-3 against those teams. So obviously that's not bad, right? That's still a 100-win season if you prorate it out, but it's not. They're doing really well. They've won 9 of their 14 games against teams with a record of 500 or worse. And then we look at this 14. We're going to say 14-4. I know they lost last night, but my research was done at 14-4. So since 1997, the wild card era, teams have started 14-4 or better 17 times. Okay, 17 teams have started the season with a record of 14-4 or better. Only 5 of those teams won 100 games or more, and only 2 of those 17 teams won the World Series. So there's something to be said about being hot at the right time and the ebbs and flows of a 162 game season. Things are going to happen. So, it's hard to say where the Dodgers are going to end up. We just can't look at them and say, yeah, they're going to win 125 games. They're going to break the record, because things just happen throughout the course of the season. But man, they're looking good right now.
Yeah.
They're just looking really good. My cold team, this is an interesting one. Cincinnati Reds. First glance, I think they're in second place in their division.
If this was, I'm sorry to interrupt, Leroy. If this was the first week of the year we were doing this, they'd be on the opposite end. Yeah.
I was going to say the same exact thing. If this was, if we had this segment 10 days ago, we would have said something completely different. I mean, so Cincinnati's scoring. I mean, they've scored 6 runs a game almost, which leads the major leagues, even after this past, 8 days or whatever. But they're giving up a ton. They're giving up 4.7 runs a game, while scoring 5.9. In this, so in this past, 3-7 last 10 games that they've gone, you have to pinpoint what's where the wheels have fallen off for Cincinnati. It's not been their hitting. Their hitting has stayed fairly hot. Not as hot as it was, but it stayed fairly hot. And it's not their starting pitching. I mean, their starting pitching this year has got a 3.7 ERA. It's their relief pitching.
Mm-hmm.
Their relief pitching is bad, starting with their closer. They've really just imploded. Their relievers have a 6 ERA. So, I don't know. The Reds sit at or near 500 right now. Where they go from here, it's really hard to say. If they can fix their bullpen, I think the Reds are there to kind of stick around and hang around with the Brewers throughout the year. And I'm not a Reds expert, so I don't really know what their options are. They have guys in their minors that they can bring up. I don't know. If they can get their bullpen fixed, they'll hang around all year. If they can't, they're probably going to sink like a rock.
It's really a coin flip in that division.
Yeah.
It's just, that's what it is. It's probably the tightest division in baseball, but I'm excited for this next one. I'm so excited to hear what Justin has to say about his hot and nots. And shout out to our boy Davis. This one's for you, buddy. We miss you. We can't wait to have you back, man.
Yeah. So, Leroy, you're speaking of the Reds. How if we did this last week, they would be your hot team, and now you're not. My hot team here, if we talked about this the first week, they would be the coldest team. That is the Oakland Athletics. And my God, did they start out bad. Looked like they were still hungover from that playoff exit to the hands of the Astros last year. They came out slow. Their pitching was not good. They weren't hitting the ball. They started out 0-6. But now, since then, as we know how baseball works, is it's a long season. There's a lot of games played. They're sitting at 12-7, which means if you can do the math there, they're 12-1 since they started out 0-6. So that's pretty, I'd say that's a pretty good ratio there. Big thing here, they're winning a lot of games. They're winning them consistently. They won 3 of their last 4 series. They've swept the last 3 series. Big thing with me, they're just scoring a lot of runs. When you look at the A's team from last year, me and Davis were so high on them. They were a great team. Their pitching was great. Their bullpen was amazing, but they didn't score a lot of runs. Well, they said, to hold my beer, we're going to start scoring some runs. And they've scored at least 6 runs in 8 of their last 11 games. And meanwhile, they're scoring all these runs. They're not giving up, a lot either, because there's a couple games in there that they have one where they scored 1 run in one. They scored 3 run in another and shut out the opposing offense in both of those games. That's how, you play to your strengths and you win games consistently like that. It's pretty impressive. A couple numbers for some of these players are just awesome. And to me, it's players you just never think would be sitting there at the top of their team and, leading their team to a win streak like this. You have Jed Lowry's leading the team with a 323 batting average. I think going into the 20 game spot, seeing a above 300 average from an everyday player, that's when it starts getting impressive. Matt Olson, it's a player I've always said is one of my favorite first baseman in the league. And he is just on an absolute tear, like absolute tear. He's got 6 home runs right now, 15 RBIs. It's impressive me as a 1.078 OPS and a 316 batting average. So for a power hitting first baseman, we know he's going to hit a lot of home runs, but this guy's just hitting the ball in general. He's getting on base. He's scoring the runs. He is helping his team. As someone who, when we see that team get cold, he might be one of the only ones hitting, or he might be the worst hitter. Seeing him right up there, as the production leader, it's a really good sign. I look at Mark Canha here. He's just doing something actually kind of crazy that no one is really realizing right now. They've played, 19 games. He has 14 walks and he has scored 20 runs by himself. I think if you're getting a guy on base that often and he is scoring, that's an all-around team effort there. But, as Billy Beane would like to say, he would love Mark Canha right now because he is getting on base. I'm sure he's up there in the office in, Oakland right now, just drooling over those numbers as I am. Like I said, this team is just hitting the ball. They're a team that's really working well with the good bullpen and hitting home runs. So far, they have 25 team home runs in 19 games. That's pretty impressive. You look at their starting lineup, they have a 3.2 wins above replacement from their starting main 6 players. That in itself is just pretty impressive. When you have almost your whole lineup is really producing as well as they are, that's going to do really good for you. Just between Mark Canha, Jed Lowry, Matt Olson, Seth Brown, and Ramon Laureano and Chad Pinder together, they have a 718 OPS. That's not fantastic, but that's pretty good. A 263 batting average on balls in play, to me, looks a little low, but when you see the 222 team average, that goes to show the balls they are putting in play, they're good hit balls. They're finding the holes. They're not relying on bad defense around them, although we saw that wide walk-off when, they had the other night with that bot's throw. But those are the things when you're a hot team, those things kind of go right for you. And for me, this is just an odd case. You look at their rotation, that the rotation hasn't been all that great. And some of these numbers are slighted from each of the first couple starts of the rotation were just poor in those first 6 games. Right now, you have Sean Manaea leading the team at a 3.04 ERA. Today's baseball, that's pretty good, the way teams can hit the ball. That's impressive. But what here is impressive to me is they're still just following the formula of Oakland Athletics baseball. They have pitching really well out of the bullpen. The 2 names sticking out to me right now, J.B. Wendelken, who just throws absolute junk, and it's very fun to see. He has a 30% K rate right now, as well as Jake Diekman also has a 30% K rate. So when you can go between any of these 2 bullpen arms and you can strike out 3 out of every 10 batters you see, and then have a good defense behind you to help you out with those other 7 out of 10, you're going to do well. And then when you're looking at the runs they're putting up is pretty impressive, because right now, Leroy, you'll like this, they're sitting at a -2 run differential. But when you look at their last 11 games compared to their first 6, if they started out those first 6 games the way they'd been playing the last week and a half, their run differential would be up there in the league lead. So that's something not to look too deep into, because
I'm
6
glad you
games.
mentioned that. I was wondering if you were
Yep.
going to touch on that, because I did notice.
See, on the books, you look at that -2 and you're like, man, that's not that great. But when you look at how bad they were to now, it's just the runs they're putting up and not giving up is just incredible to me. And the coolest part with that, this is a division that the hottest team is going to take this division. As we're seeing the Astros sitting down there, I think they're still in last right now. This kind of team is what's going to be scary for the rest of the AL West. And I really do think they do need to look out for the A's a little bit, as everyone sleeps on them, but it's all right. Me and Davis aren't worried about that one. But this one's going to be fun. My not team. This is the last place team in the AL East. Team everyone was not expecting them to be playing this poorly. This is the New York Yankees. Right now they're sitting at 7-11, which is last place in, like I said, the AL East. In their last 12 games, they're only 4 for 8, which is not a great number. When you're looking at this lineup, no one is hitting. It's just they're looking real poor everywhere. They're striking out a bunch. Their team leader in average right now is Gio Urshela with the 276. Kyle Higashioka is hitting over 300, but he has only played in 9 games. So that's not, that's a pretty slated number. If it wasn't for Gio Urshela right now, this team would look a lot worse. I feel bad for that guy's back, as I know he is carrying all of that half of New York on it right now. We talked about Gleyber Torres earlier. A guy who was a top prospect in baseball. They sent Aroldis Chapman to the Cubs to bring him, ended up getting Aroldis Chapman back, and he just has not been what they need at the shortstop position this year. He is close to the top in errors of shortstops across the league. He is not hitting well. He's hitting arguably one of the poorest on the team. You have Aaron Judge, does have his 4 home runs, but he has missed already some games this season with injury. That is, if you're a Yankees fan, very concerning. If he's already battling this stuff this early in the season, when you have a team like the Red Sox who are, on the verge of almost running away with that division, I think the Yankees are in a very tough spot. Their team OPS is 629. That is not Yankee-like, and that's not going to win you a lot of ball games. In today's MLB, they're striking out 24% of the time. You got to think, if they have 40 at bats in a game, if they're hitting well, they're striking out a quarter. They're striking out 10 times out of that. It's not good look on them. As a team, we know they're going to hit a lot of home runs. They're going to strike out a lot. But right now, striking out is really all they're doing. I will say for the Yankees, there is one bright spot on that team so far. That is Garrett Cole. But that's not really surprising. He has a 1.82 ERA right now. But if you take Garrett Cole out of that starting rotation, this starting rotation is almost at the bottom of the AL. For a team that really made a point of going out and improving that lineup, they're not doing it. Aaron Boone's in a lot of hot water with Yankee fans. They're getting booed. They're throwing stuff on the field. If you're a fan of any other team in the AL East, this is a great thing to see. But for the Yankees, it's just not looking very good. That all around, they're just cold, man. 211 team average. That's not gonna, do you very well. He finally did pull out the win yesterday against Cleveland. So maybe that's gonna, kickstart something for them. But right now, the Yankees are they're in some deep doo-doo. Definitely some deep doo-doo. That's tough for them to see. They have 18 home runs in 18 games. That's not bad. But for a team, again, who we all predicted they'd have 5 or 6 players with 30 home runs, that's not looking good. And the injuries are killing them. Missing Luke Voigt has been a big thing for them this year. They brought in Jay Bruce. Their team's so bad, he said, I'm retiring. I'm done with this. So he's no longer there. So there's been a lot of mix up also with what they're doing in their lineup. It doesn't help much. But I could go on all day about that. So I'm going to give it over to you, Leroy. We're going to kick it away with our 7th inning stretch.
That'd be Jared. But I would like to say something just because I like.
I was looking right at you, Leroy. I apologize.
I like to needle you and Davis a little bit on your backup favorite teams. And I just want to point out real quick that Oakland, while they're looking good, they're 12-7. I don't know if they won last night. I missed that, but they have played 16 games against teams under 500.
Yeah.
I will say it is impressive that they went from 1-7 to 12-7 or 1-6, whatever it was. But yes, Leroy has a point. If you play bad teams, you're probably going to win a lot of games like that. And they actually are coming to play our Baltimore Orioles this weekend, so hopefully we can end that win streak that they have going on there. But yes, it is time for the stretch. Leroy did not prepare his version of the stretch this week, so I'm going to be taking over as I normally do. And we always start the stretch off with our trivia question. Now, Leroy still leads the way with 3 points. Justin and Davis both at 2. So, guys, we haven't had a right answer in a long time. So let's see if you guys can get this question right this week. Max Scherzer's 99 games with 10 plus strikeouts is the most among active pitchers. So the job for you boys this week is to tell me who is in second behind him with 10 plus strikeouts.
How many does he have?
He has 99 games with 10 plus strikeouts. Who is the second pitcher right after him? Take some time to think about it. We got a lot of good choices here.
See, the man I'm thinking of, I don't know if he's been in long enough, but I want to go with Jacob deGrom.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I wish I would have thought of that, but I didn't. I'll go Garrett Cole.
Okay. The guys have locked in. They picked both aces from New York, but the correct answer is the ace in Boston. Chris Sale has the second most games.
See, and that's crazy because he hasn't pitched since pitching a full season since what, 2018? That's
this come
insane.
I think this came up a few weeks ago too. So this
I do remember seeing that. Yeah.
I don't know about you, Justin, but I think this whole question's under protest.
What, are you going to go take it to Manfred now?
You're going to get yourself a suspension, Leroy. Don't clap in front of him.
Castellanos can join you in that, but no,
that's nuts to think about.
We could definitely talk about that next week. But yes, the correct answer was Chris Sale. He has 78 games with 10 or more strikeouts, second behind Max Scherzer's 99. So he's been hurt a little while, but he still has that second place locked in. Just like Justin and Davis do. They've been in second place, tied for second for a long time in our trivia because nobody's getting them right. I might have to ease it a little bit so we can get some action here. But guys, those were good guesses, though. I really do think that we will get on the board soon. Let's hope. But let's get into that 7th inning stretch. All right, guys. The Astros have announced that they've signed catcher Martin Maldonado to a contract extension. The team didn't disclose terms, although Mark Feinstein reports that Maldonado was guaranteed $5 million on a 1-year deal, which contains a $5 million vesting option for the 2023 season. And now we mentioned Babe Ruth earlier with Justin and the Yankees. Him and Neil Walker, 2 veterans, have retired in the last week. Of course, longtime Pirate second baseman and Cincinnati Reds outfielder, both of them. Walker spent 12 seasons in the big leagues with a career .267 average with 149 home runs and 1,224 total hits. Babe Ruth, on the other hand, a 3-time All-Star, spent 14 seasons in the bigs where he tallied a career .244 average with 319 homers and 1,455 total hits. And all of us at the walk-off wish Neil and Jay a happy retirement and all the best in their future endeavors. Now, here's an interesting little bit to end the stretch this week. We were talking about it in our group chats. MLB.TV is registering record streaming numbers through the first 3 weeks of the season. The beginning of the season marked the most watched 18-day period in the 20-season history of MLB.TV. And during the 18-day period from opening day through April 18th, fans watched more than 1.34 billion, with a B, billion minutes of live games on the streaming service, a 12% increase compared to the first 18 days of last year, and a 43% increase when it came to the same period in 2019. Now, MLB.TV has registered the 7 most watched days ever and 8 of the top 10 most watched days in MLB.TV history just in this year alone. And Justin and I have been putting MLB.TV to good use this season. Justin, back to you, my man.
I remember seeing that on Facebook. That is insane. And then you think about the fact that on MLB TV, you can't even watch your own team. So imagine how much better those numbers would be, you know, if heaven forbid you could watch a team that you paid the streaming service to watch. But we're not going to get into that because that's another thing I could go off all day. But that is a very positive sign. That is a really, really good thing to hear. I'm definitely enjoying being able to watch really anyone watching 3-4 games at once. It's giving me headaches daily, and I love it. But we're going to jump over here, talk about giving headaches as a guy in Milwaukee who, to be honest with you, a lot of people around the league, a lot of fans around the league really don't even know much about him. And that is Corbin Burnes. And he is burning hitters just left and right over there in Milwaukee. What he is doing right now is just absolutely incredible. There's no precedent for it. So far in his first 4 starts, he has 40 strikeouts to 0 walks. The only stain on that so far, I think it's 3 batters he has hit so far. That's still a really, really good number. 40 strikeouts, no walks. He's got 8 hits in 24.1 innings pitched. So even then, when he's not striking out batters, he's, keeping good wood off of the ball. He's not giving up home runs. He has a .329 walks hit per innings pitched. He is letting a third of a runner on base every inning, meaning he is. So what does that come to? Three base runners every 9 innings. If I'm good at math, which I'm not, that's pretty incredible. This is just nuts. So I talk a lot about OPS plus because that stat's so great. It just normalizes the stadiums in the league. As we know, that's one of the odd things in baseball. Then you look at ERA plus, it's really the same thing before pitcher in their ERA. League average is 100. Okay. You guys ready for this? Corbin Burnes ERA plus right now is 1,104. Meaning he's just obliterating everyone. So if he's 2-1 with the 0.37 ERA, that's a number Tony La Russa is pretty familiar with. His OPS against right now, 300 OPS against him. That's just absolutely incredible. This is what blows my mind right here. Is we're talking about the strikeouts. He has a 47% strikeout rate. Literally just under half of every single batter he is facing is not only getting out, but he is striking them out. He's keeping the defense from the chance of errors, not putting them on base in any respect, not even getting, the wood on the ball. That's pretty incredible. We know today's MLB is big in a home run or strikeout, but that's still 47% strikeout rate. That's nuts. And then here, this is what is also goes very well with this, is really helping his ERA here, is his 54% ground ball rate. So if he's striking out, let's say that's a 50% strikeout rate, then of the half of the hitters he's facing that are hitting the ball, half of them are just putting it right on the ground into his defense, which is, in my opinion, an underrated defense behind him. So he is getting a little bit of help, but he's doing very well for himself to help that defense help him. He has a 2.56 ground ball to fly ball rate. So every 2.5 ground balls he throws, he's only giving up the 1 fly ball, which is pretty impressive. And he's playing in a stadium that you can give up the fly balls too. So, that's definitely helping him out. But what's really cool that I'm seeing here is when you look at his last few years, these numbers actually aren't that much of outliers, really, other than the strikeout to walk rate. He is staying around consistent, which shows that this isn't a fluke. He's getting it together with a little bit of help from the defense is helping those numbers, and he's just some of those pitches he's throwing to batters, they look like Xbox players on the show where you're swinging at absolutely everything like me. And then the big thing here just goes shows they're not hitting well off of him at all. His 1.71 batting average on balls in play. Yes, part of that is your defense, but he is just putting the ball in spots where his defense can make the plays. If you're the defense and you have a pitcher like that, and if I'm correct, it's not even their number one. Brandon Woodruff also pitching, like we said, pretty well with that. They're putting the Brewers in a really good spot. And the best thing with that, this is a division where almost himself, Corbin Burnes, just putting the Brewers at the top of it. So that's real impressive. I want to go to you, Jared, real quick. I want to know what you think about this guy over here in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I'll keep it pretty brief because you really hit almost everything we needed to know. But yeah, you're right. He's just been super consistent. His first year in the majors was 2018. He's 23 years old, and he went 7-0 in 30 games. I mean, that's pretty good with a 2.61 ERA in 38 innings. Struck out 35. He did walk 11 that year. But then the following year in 2019, it's where he got hit hard. In 32 games, he had 8.82 ERA. Not very good. In just 49 innings, gave up 48 earned runs, 17 of which were homers. And then right in 2020, back to normal, 2.11 ERA in 12 games, right? So it's extremely historic what he's doing right now. And like I mentioned earlier, from my hot knot with the Brewers, he is 11 strikeouts away from tying Kenley Jansen for the most strikeouts without walking a batter in history. If he can get to 12 more strikeouts, he will make history, Major League Baseball history.
Now, I want to say one thing to that, Jared, because it popped in my head and you were talking about Kenley Jansen earlier. That's a pretty good number to be catching up to. Now, mind you, that number is set by a relief pitcher who historically is a 1 inning, maybe 1.2 inning guy. You have Corbin Burnes coming out here seeing lineups 2 and 3 times, and he is still doing this. To me, that just you can multiply his number by 3 to really understand what he is doing when you look at it, in that sense.
It's insane what he's doing. 40 strikeouts without giving up a walk. And get this, he's only allowed 8 hits and 1 earned run this year. And it was on a home run. And I believe the first game he pitched against Minnesota. It's crazy. 2-1 record. He did get the loss in that game just because of that 1 earned runs, because the offense has just been super quiet. 24 and a third innings pitched so far. Just that 1 earned run. It's unbelievable what he's doing. I'm going to give it to Leroy because this guy is just obviously the favorite for the NL Cy Young. And I know it's early. It's only 4 starts for him, but he is the front runner for that award right now.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, Justin, you said it, he's a starter. This is the best 4-game span, not just to start a season, any 4-game span we've ever seen by a starting pitcher in regards to strikeouts and walks. We've never seen a 4-game span like this. It's just absolutely insane. And you know what I like to look at when we talk about things like this, like it's how's he doing it? Like, look, what's going on? Last year, the year before you talked about it, he struggled. Last year, he was really, really good, but he wasn't this good. And if you look back, if you read some articles at the beginning of the year, there were some predictions out there, and I'm going to shout out somebody in a minute that said he could be this good. But how's he doing it? He's doing it with the best cutter in the game, the absolute best cutter in the game, that he throws at 96.1 miles an hour faster than anyone else in the game. Just to kind of show you how he's using this cutter this year. First of all, last year in 2020, as good as he threw this cutter 31.5% of the time. This year, he's throwing it 50% of the time. So he's upped his usage of the cutter. He only throws a 4-seam fastball like 8% of the time, which is insane. So he's faced 85 batters this year. 10 of those batters have worked him to ball 3, and he struck out 6 of them. But I want to focus on one time when he got to a ball 3 with no strikes. He was 3-0. The streak was over. He's about to walk a batter. He threw 3 straight cut fastballs. He knows what he's doing with this cutter. And that's why I say I want to give a shout out to someone. I don't know this guy. I just read a little bit of his stuff. His name is Josh Waldock, and he writes for Fansided for the Brewers. And he wrote an article in March that said, if Corbin Burnes increases the percentage with which he throws his cutter, he could be the best pitcher in baseball. And apparently Corbin Burnes reads his stuff, and he did just that. And now he's the best pitcher in baseball. So let's look at just a couple of stats that throwing this cutter 16% more of the time has allowed. So we talk about barrel percentage. I think, Justin, you said batters just aren't getting wood on the ball. And you're exactly right. His career barrel percentage is 6.4. This year is down to 4.8. The launch angle. So you talked about the ground balls, right? In 2018, his rookie year, his average launch angle was 9.1. Into that, which is still good. Don't get me wrong. That's like Mike Yastrzemski's average launch angle. So, it's good. It's going to get a lot of guys out, but In 2019, his average launch angle was 10.5. In 2020, his average launch angle was 9.7. Again, these are good numbers. This year, the average launch angle is 2.1. Everybody's grounding out. Now, so what that tells me is not exactly sustainable. 40 strikeouts with no walks is not exactly sustainable. So he's going to see some bumps, right? Um, the question is he the best pitcher in the game at this exact moment, April, whatever, 2021, he is the best pitcher in the game. Can he hold that? I don't know. Maybe. We've seen it before. I mention Mark Pryor, who looked very Burnes-like until he started getting injured. Dontrell Willis, dare I mention guys like that. And I don't want to jinx him because I enjoy watching Corbin Burnes like you guys. I love MLB.TV, and as long as I can stay awake, I'm watching it. A little inside joke, but yeah, he's fun to watch, man. He's absolutely fun to watch. The drop on his pitches is just insane, and you can look that stat up, but it's absolutely insane. Yeah, he's fun to watch, and man, I don't know. He's the next. He's a Randy Johnson type, a guy that just looked really good, and then just took off and became unhittable.
Yeah, really quickly, Justin, before we wrap things up here, Corbin Burnes in all 4 of his starts has at least gone 6 innings. And that's in the National League where you have to do these double switches and pinch hit for your pitchers. And 2 of those games, he only threw 80, or excuse me, in 3 of those games, he didn't even throw 90 pitches. He was at 87 pitches, 86 pitches, 81 pitches. In the American League, you're most likely sending him out for a 7th inning if he's dealing. And it's a shame because he lost in 2 of the games he's pitched. The Brewers have lost because they've scored 0 runs and 1 run. But in his last 2, they scored 7 runs and 6 runs. So he's getting some run support, which is good to see, unlike somebody over in New York over there.
and that, friends, is why wins and losses for a pitcher is a ridiculous stat.
Yeah, that, I mean, it really is, because you look at his record, that 2-1 off of 1 home run. I call that a Jacob deGrom loss. Where on about 24 other teams, that's going to be a win. What Corbin Burnes is doing is just absolutely incredible, and the entire league needs to be watching him. But I had this funny thought. We're talking about him, Leroy, you're talking about his cutter. Corbin Burnes is the best pitcher in baseball right now. Is the cutter the best pitch in baseball right now? Look at it this way. He raises that cutter rate. He starts striking everyone out. He's inching up on the record of the guy with the most strikeouts to no walks, who also throws a very good cutter. So, it's pretty interesting to me.
It's the thing. Here's the thing, though, Justin, really quickly. There's becoming slowly each year not that much difference between a cutter and a slider because pitchers are just throwing so hard nowadays. Tanner Scott of the Orioles is throwing a 90-mile-an-hour slider.
And that thing moves.
And it moves. And Corey Kluber doesn't know what to call his slider / curveball. He calls it a slurve or whatever. It's just the cutter is becoming a more used pitch in baseball, and it was really revolutionized by Mariano Rivera because he couldn't throw a 4-seam fastball because it just kept moving, and they're like, dude, you got something special here. This pitch is crazy. It's 90+ mile an hour and it's moving. This is money.
Yeah.
I would encourage you guys I'm going to age myself, to go read a little bit about Mike Scott in the 80s. Mike Scott was just an average pitcher for the Astros, nothing special about him. He learned a new pitch, a splitter, which I don't know, splitter, cutter, they're very similar.
Yep. The speed's different.
And he went average, boom, and just took off in 87, 88. And then, of course, the league followed him. Everybody was throwing the splitter, and then the hitters caught up, and it's just a big cycle. We'll see that again here.
Yeah, but it's definitely a good pitch in today's baseball, where it's about seeing the ball up, getting under the ball. Yeah, good luck getting up and under on that pitch. But that leads me to our today in baseball history, talking about getting under balls. Today in 1999, we talk about his son a whole bunch now. We're going to talk about Daddy Tatis. We're going to talk about Fernando Tatis Sr. back in the Cardinals as a third baseman. We hit 2 grand slams in 1 inning. Just incredible. He shattered the current record of RBIs in a single inning, which was 6. I think the most mind-blowing stat to me here is the Dodgers left that starting pitcher, I think his name was Hon-Soo Park, left him in to see another bases loaded and see Tatis again. But, in today's world, we're talking about a whole bunch about Tatis Jr. So let's think about Senior today and his record, 2 grand slams in 1 inning. Sometimes you don't even see teams maybe even hit 2 grand slams in a whole season, let alone in 1 game, let alone in 1 inning. And then again, let alone by these same guys. So that's just, that was the easy pick for the fact of the day there.
You'll never see that again where the same pitcher will give up 2 grand slams because managers yank their pitchers after 40 pitches in the first inning nowadays. It's just not the same as it was back then.
And that's just, to me, that is an incredible, incredible feat. I want to ask you, Leroy, if me and Jared were both real young then. Do you remember when he did that? Was that all over ESPN and Sports Center and all that?
We didn't have MLB.TV back then or, a way to stream the games. But absolutely, that was when Sports Center was at its peak. And, you tuned in every night. And I absolutely, as soon as you started talking about it, I'd say, yep, I remember.
I like how Justin and I always ask, Leroy, did you see that back in the day? Did you see this?
I sure did. I jumped in my horse and carriage. I rode to the town square, unloaded my corn, and we heard people tell tale of it.
He saw Babe Ruth hit his first home run. It's just Leroy's the best. He's really the best.
I heard when he pointed to the stands in the World Series game, he was actually pointing to you, Leroy.
He was, and I was 38 years old at the time, which makes it even crazier.
Dude, you look really good for your age if that was the case.
Thank you. I keep saying 150 is the new 20.
Yeah, we aspire for that, Leroy. But fortunately, that is all for today. We hope you all enjoyed. Make sure you give us a follow on all the social medias and YouTube. But for now, it is time to walk it off.